So, now we finally declared independence. However, as an independent nation, we need to figure out how we're going to govern ourselves. So we called on the Second Continental Congress to create a new government and set up the rules of how this new nation would work. As we talked about in the first set of videos, the institutions we create matter, and the rules of the game affect the outcome of the game. So this becomes incredibly important, how we're going to do this. However, there are also a number of popular/political concerns to deal with, including a number of psychological issues created by the previous government. With all of this in mind, the Second Continental Congress created what's known as the Articles of Confederation. The basis of this document was a highly decentralized government, with a national government given limited authority by the states. These articles created a new permanent Congress to replace the Second Continental Congress, a sort of ad hoc group of people getting together to deal with one task. In this new permanent Congress, each state received one vote. Major laws required the endorsement of 9 of 13 states, or approximately 75% of all the states that existed at the time. This was a significant bar to cross, but it got even worse if you tried to amend the Constitution. This required unanimous agreement. Think about this for a minute. Trying to get 3/4 of Congress on board with something, 3/4 of the states on board with something, is going to be difficult enough. I mean, think about it in today's society with all the different interests we have, the different regions, the different, just beliefs we have, the polarization, the gridlock, all these ideas. Getting 3/4 of the people on board is going to be incredibly difficult to do, let alone unanimous consent for something. Think about even a small group of people with like minds, getting them to agree on something entirely unanimously is going to be incredibly difficult. So as you can see, the goal here is to create a bias toward inaction. Limit the federal government's power because they can only do things that virtually all the states consent to. The delegates were suspicious of national authority and were afraid of losing control to a strong national government. They much preferred local control led by the states rather than having the potential for another King of England who could push them around. So the new Confederated States were at war. And this led to, as we talked about, a number of coordination problems, particularly given the states' reticence to give away much power to a national government. States were chiefly responsible for recruiting troops and outfitting them for battle, but a national military command was in charge of organizing this fighting force. Congress had the power to borrow money, but wasn't given the authority to tax, so there's no real way of paying any of this money back. They also didn't have an administrative branch like we do now. So Congress had to do all the requisitioning of guns, food, uniforms, etc., and the paperwork associated with putting together an army. The point of this slide here is to talk about how incredibly difficult it is to try and coordinate something like a major war under a federal government designed to frustrate any sort of action. It's a miracle we managed to survive this war, but at the end of the day, that's basically what happened. We lasted long enough to make the British give up. We survived, and then the real fight to govern begins. So, after 6 years of war, we're finally at peace, but the nation's debt was staggering at the time. We owed $25 million to American creditors and another $10 million to foreign governments. Additionally, we had a war-torn economy with farms being destroyed in battle. Most of the able-bodied men had been called into military service, and many of them had died or been wounded during the war, leaving our agrarian economy in shambles. Additionally, we had the problem of a weak national government to deal with. The best illustration of this was something known as Shays' Rebellion, and this is where a group of farmers who were about to have their land foreclosed on managed to take control of a courthouse in Massachusetts for approximately 6 months. Let me repeat that. They kept control of a federal courthouse for 6 months. Think about how long you all would last now if you tried to do something like this. Like if you all tried to take over the bell tower, you might last 6 hours if the police were being in a good mood that day. But because we didn't have a national army to stop these farmers, they were able to keep it for 6 long months. This was an embarrassment to the federal government, and it made it abundantly clear that it's time to call a constitutional convention and fix some of the problems with the Articles of Confederation. So, 55 delegates meet in Philadelphia in 1787 to revise the Articles, but quickly realized that the document was not fixable. They shared their expertise in stories of war and its aftermath, and began to discuss political philosophy at the time. At the top of the list was a contract philosopher named John Locke, who you may read in your political philosophy classes with Professor Lester. And he was a strong proponent of popular sovereignty, which you'll recall from Lecture 1 meant rule by the people. They try to revise the document, they have to throw it away, start over, and in the next slides we'll go ahead and talk about exactly what they came up with. So, something to look forward to for you.